This story is titled, I Was Banned from My Sister's Wedding Because My Face Was Too Disfigured from Saving Her Life. Have you ever saved someone's life only to have them turn their back on you? I never thought I'd be asking myself this question, especially not about my own sister. As I sit here, staring at the wedding invitation that arrived 3 days ago, my scarred hands trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief, I can't help but wonder how we got here. The sister I jumped into a burning car to save now wants me nowhere near her. Perfect. Wedding because my face might ruin her photos. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand everything that led to this moment. I'm Marcus, 28M, and until 8 months ago, I was just your average guy working as a high school chemistry teacher in suburban Minnesota. My sister Andrea, 25F, and I were always close, despite our different personalities. She was the social butterfly, working as an event planner and dating Tyler, 29M, a successful real estate agent. Our parents, Robert, 56M, and Claire, 54F, always said we complemented each other perfectly. I was the sensible one who'd talk her out of her wilder ideas, and she was the one who dragged me out of my comfort zone. Life was good, simple even. I had my own apartment, a job I loved, and was casually dating someone named Rachel, 27F, who I'd met at a local coffee shop. Every Sunday, we'd all gather at our parents' house for dinner. Andrea would bring Tyler, I'd bring Rachel, and we'd spend hours talking about our weeks and future plans. Andrea would excitedly share details about her upcoming wedding, which she'd been planning for over a year. Everything was picture perfect, until that rainy night in July. I remember every detail of that evening with crystal clarity. Andrea had called me, crying about a fight she had with Tyler. She wanted to meet at our usual spot, a small diner just outside of town. It was pouring rain, the kind of heavy downpour that makes it almost impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. I was about 10 minutes away when I saw her car swerving on the wet road ahead of me. What happened next still haunts my dreams. Her car hydroplaned, spinning out of control before crashing into a guardrail. The impact wasn't what scared me, it was what I saw next. Smoke started billowing from under her hood, and then I saw the first flicker of flames. You know those stories you hear about people doing incredible things in moments of crisis? How mothers lift cars to save their children. I never understood that kind of instinctive reaction until that moment. I didn't think about the rain, the fire, or the danger. All I could think was, that's my baby sister in there. But here's the thing about being a hero: nobody tells you about the aftermath. Nobody mentions the months of skin grafts, the excruciating physical therapy, or how your students try not to stare at your scarred face when you finally return to work. And they certainly don't tell you that the person you saved might one day look at those same scars and see them as an inconvenience rather than a testament to your love for them. How quickly we forget the sacrifices others make for us, right? I thought the worst was behind us. Andrea recovered completely, not a single scar on her. Meanwhile, I learned to live with my new reflection, even started to see my scars as badges of honor. Rachel stuck by me through it all, saying they made me look distinguished. But as Andrea's wedding day drew closer, something began to change. The Sunday dinners became less frequent. Andrea's calls grew shorter. Then came the invitation. But before I tell you about the gut punch of a conversation with my sister, you need to understand just how much everything changed in those 8 months. Because what happened next? Well, let's just say it made me question everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and what we owe to the people we love. The invitation sat on my coffee table for 3 days before Andrea finally called. I still remember checking my phone that morning, seeing her name pop up, and thinking maybe, just maybe, there had been some kind of mistake. God, I was so naive. "We need to talk about the wedding," she said. Her voice had that fake sweet tone she usually reserved for clients she didn't like. I should have known right then what was coming. What followed was possibly the most surreal conversation of my life. My sister, the same person I'd pulled from a burning car 8 months ago, proceeded to explain how she'd been thinking about the aesthetic of her wedding. Apparently, her photographer had concerns about how my scars would translate in photos. Can you believe this shit? The sister I'd grown up with, shared secrets with, and literally scarred myself for life to save, was telling me that my face didn't fit her wedding's vision. But it got worse. Andrea suggested that I could still attend, just not be in any of the official photos. Maybe I could sit in the back during the ceremony, she said, where the lighting wasn't as good. You know, so my scars wouldn't be as noticeable. Like I was some kind of embarrassing family secret to be hidden away. I sat there in stunned silence as she rambled on about her perfect day and how she'd already had to make so many compromises. The worst part? She actually thought she was being generous. You understand, right? She kept saying, like she was asking me to swap shifts at work or something equally mundane. When I finally found my voice, I asked her if she remembered that night. The rain. The flames. The smoke. I asked if she remembered who pulled her out while her precious Tyler was nowhere to be found. Did she remember screaming my name in terror as the flames got closer? Her response? Of course I remember, Marcus. And I'm grateful, really I am. But this is my wedding day we're talking about. These photos will be forever. Forever. Just like my scars. The kicker came when she mentioned she'd already discussed it with our parents. Apparently Mom and Dad thought I should be understanding about the whole thing. After all, Andrea had been through such a traumatic experience, and this was her special day. Right, because nearly burning to death clearly wasn't traumatic enough for me. Rachel was with me when I got off the phone. She watched as I sat there, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. My girlfriend, who'd helped change my bandages and never once flinched at my scars, was absolutely livid. She wanted to call Andrea back immediately and give her a piece of her mind. But I stopped her. Because in that moment, something inside me changed. The hurt and shock were still there, but underneath, something else was brewing. Something darker. Something that made me realize that maybe, just maybe, it was time for Andrea to understand what it really means to lose something precious. You see, being a chemistry teacher has its advantages. I know interesting things about how different substances react. And I know exactly how to make something look like an accident. No, I'm not talking about hurting anyone. But Andrea's precious. Perfect wedding? Well, let's just say I've started forming a plan. You want to talk about aesthetics, dear sister? Just wait until you see what I have in mind for your special day. The irony isn't lost on me. 8 months ago, I risked everything to save her. Now, I'm planning to ruin the one thing she cares about most. But you know what? Sometimes, the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it needs to be served in front of 200 guests and a professional photographer. Rachel thinks I should just cut Andrea out of my life and move on. Maybe she's right. But when I look in the mirror every morning, when I see the twisted flesh that used to be my face, when I remember how I didn't hesitate for a second to save her, I know I can't just walk away. Not this time. Besides, isn't it funny how life works? Andrea is so worried about her wedding photos being perfect. Maybe she should be more worried about whether there'll be a wedding at all. 2 days after Andrea's phone call, my parents showed up unannounced at my apartment. The moment I opened the door and saw their faces, I knew exactly why they were there. Mom was clutching her purse like she always does when she's nervous. And Dad had that stern look he used to give me when I was a teenager and had done something wrong. Funny how they still thought they could treat me like a child who needed to be corrected. The conversation started civilly enough. Mom made small talk about the weather while Dad paced around my living room, examining my photos on the wall like he'd never seen them before. But we all knew this wasn't a casual visit. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and got to the point. Apparently, Andrea had been crying for days. She was stressed about the wedding, they said. The venue was giving her problems. The caterer had raised their prices, and now her own brother was being difficult about the photography situation. Difficult. That's what they were calling my reaction to being treated like some kind of monster who needed to be hidden away. Mom tried to play mediator, suggesting compromises that were almost as insulting as Andrea's original request. Maybe I could wear special makeup. Or perhaps the photographer could do some touch-ups in post-production? Each suggestion felt like another knife in my back. These were my parents, the same people who had sat by my hospital bed for weeks, who had watched me struggle through painful rehabilitation. Now they were acting like my scars were some minor inconvenience that could be covered up with a bit of concealer. The argument that followed was unlike anything we'd ever had before. 28 years of buried resentments and unspoken words came pouring out. I reminded them of the nights I spent in excruciating pain while Andrea was out partying. The way they'd always made excuses for her behavior. How she'd never once visited me during my skin graft procedures. Do you know she was at a beach resort with Tyler while I was learning how to smile again without it hurting? Dad's face turned that dangerous shade of red I remembered from childhood as he accused me of being selfish. Your sister could have died that night, he thundered, completely missing the irony of his statement. The least you can do is make this one small sacrifice for her happiness. That's when I lost it. I pulled up my shirt to show them the scarring that spread across my chest and back. Small sacrifice? I asked. Like this one? Or this? I pointed to my face. Tell me, Dad, where was Tyler that night? Where were any of you when I was pulling her out of that car? Mom started crying, of course. She always cried when confronted with uncomfortable truths. But this time, her tears didn't move me. I was done being the understanding one, the one who had to compromise, the one who had to bear all the scars, both physical and emotional, while everyone else got to move on with their perfect lives. The final straw came when Dad suggested that maybe I was jealous. Jealous of Andrea's happiness, of her perfect life with Tyler, of her unmarred face. He actually had the audacity to suggest that my refusal to accommodate her wedding photo request stemmed from some deep-seated envy rather than justified anger at being treated like a family embarrassment. I told them to leave. But before they did, I said something I never thought I'd say to my parents. The next time Andrea's life is in danger, don't expect me to burn myself saving her. Clearly, the family would prefer a beautiful corpse to a scarred hero. Mom gasped. Dad called me disgusting. But as they walked out of my apartment, I felt strangely calm. Something had broken in me that afternoon, or maybe something had finally clicked into place. The parents who had raised me to believe in family above all else had just shown me their true colors, just like Andrea had. Rachel found me hours later, sitting in the dark, staring at old family photos. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me and held my hand. But in my mind, I was already starting to formulate ideas. Andrea wanted a perfect wedding? Mom and Dad wanted their precious daughter's special day to be flawless? Well, sometimes the best way to teach people the value of something is to take it away from them. That night, I deleted my family's numbers from my phone and started making plans. Not just for revenge, but for justice. Because sometimes, family isn't about blood, it's about who's willing to walk through fire for you. And in my case, quite literally. Social media can be a special kind of torture. For the past 2 weeks, my feed has been flooded with posts about Andrea's upcoming fairy tale wedding. Every time I open Instagram, there she is, my picture-perfect sister, surrounded by smiling bridesmaids in her final dress fitting, showing off the elegant venue, arranging pristine white flowers that probably cost more than my monthly salary. If they only knew what was coming. Through mutual friends, I've learned all about the extravagant plans. The ceremony will be held at the prestigious Maxwell Hotel, with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Andrea chose a classic elegance, theme everything in white and gold. 200 guests. A 5-tier wedding cake. Professional string quartet. Ice sculptures. The works. Mom's been bragging to everyone at her book club about how Tyler's parents contributed a significant amount to make their princess's dreams come true. Yesterday, Rachel showed me a video that one of Andrea's bridesmaids posted. It was from the rehearsal dinner everyone gathered at that fancy new restaurant downtown. Andrea was glowing in a white designer dress, probably a pre-wedding dress, because apparently that's a thing now. Mom and Dad were beaming with pride, raising their champagne glasses as Tyler gave some heartfelt speech about destiny and perfect matches. Funny how destiny didn't make him brave enough to pull her from that burning car. The worst part? They've been using my absence to paint themselves as the victims. Andrea told everyone I'm going through some personal issues, and they're respecting my privacy by giving me space. Mom's been posting throwback photos of Andrea and me as kids, with captions about missing her boy, and hoping I'll find my way back to the family. The hypocrisy is enough to make me sick. Even my own students have been caught up in the excitement. One of them came to class wearing a Team Bride t-shirt. Apparently Andrea hired her as a part-time assistant for the wedding planning. She spent 10 minutes gushing about how amazing my sister is, how perfectly organized everything is, how it's going to be the wedding of the year. I just smiled and nodded, the scars on my face pulling tight. If she only knew what her amazing event planner said about her own brother's disfigurement. Last night, I drove past my parents' house force of habit more than anything else. The driveway was full of cars, and I could see them all through the big bay window, gathered around the dining room table. Andrea was standing, probably practicing her wedding speech, while everyone watched adoringly. Tyler had his arm around her waist. Mom was wiping away tears. Dad was recording everything on his phone. It was like a scene from a Hallmark movie, the perfect family preparing for the perfect wedding. Rachel caught me watching and suggested we leave before someone saw us. She's right, of course. She's always right. But I couldn't help but linger for a moment, remembering all the Sunday dinners we used to have around that table. All the celebrations, the laughter, the love I thought was unconditional. How quickly it all burns away when you're no longer aesthetically pleasing enough to be included in the family photos. The wedding is in 3 days. They're all so busy with their final preparations, their rehearsals, their picture-perfect moments. Andrea's latest post shows her wedding countdown chalkboard. 72 hours until I marry my soulmate. The comments are full of heart emojis and congratulations. Nobody suspects anything. Why would they? In their minds, I'm just the bitter, disfigured brother who couldn't be happy for his sister's special day. The family disappointment who couldn't understand that some sacrifices need to be made for the sake of perfect wedding photos. They probably think I'm sitting at home, nursing my wounds, regretting my decision to skip the wedding. If only they knew what I was actually planning. Rachel's been watching me closely, probably worried about what I might do. She knows me well enough to sense that I'm up to something, but she hasn't asked any questions. Maybe she doesn't want to know. Or maybe she understands that some things can't be forgiven, some bridges need to be burned completely. Tomorrow is the final preparation day. The flowers will be delivered. The cake will be finished. The place cards will be arranged. Everything will be perfect, just like Andrea always wanted. And I'll be in my lab at school, after hours, making my own preparations. Because every fairy tale wedding needs a memorable ending, right, sis? The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, exactly what Andrea had hoped for her outdoor ceremony at the Maxwell Hotel's garden terrace. I watched from my car as the guests filed in, all dressed in their finest. Rachel squeezed my hand, asking one last time if I was sure about this. I just nodded. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Being a chemistry teacher has its perks, like knowing exactly what combination of harmless ingredients can create the most memorable reactions. I'd spent the last few days preparing everything meticulously in my lab after hours. Nothing dangerous, I'm not a monster. Just something that would make this wedding unforgettable for all the right, or wrong reasons. I waited until the ceremony was about to begin before making my move. The hotel staff knew me after all. I was still listed as a groomsman until 2 weeks ago. Nobody questioned my presence as I walked through the back entrance, carrying what looked like a wedding gift. Rachel stayed in the car, ready for our quick exit. The garden terrace was stunning. White roses everywhere, golden chairs arranged in perfect rows, a string quartet playing softly. The 5-tier wedding cake stood proudly near the refreshment area, exactly where I knew it would be. Perfect. That's when Andrea spotted me. She was in her preparation room adjacent to the terrace, door open, surrounded by bridesmaids. The look on her face shifted from shock to anger to fear in seconds. She came storming out in her pristine white dress, designer heels clicking against the marble floor. "What do you think you're doing here?" she hissed, keeping her voice low to avoid drawing attention. "I told you you're not welcome. Your face will ruin everything." I smiled, feeling my scars stretch. "Just wanted to congratulate my sister on her perfect day." Mom and Dad appeared behind her, their faces pale. Dad started to move toward me, but I held up my hand. "Don't worry, I'm not here to make a scene. Just dropping off a wedding gift." Andrea's face contorted with disgust. "I don't want anything from you. You're not my brother anymore. Do you know how much stress you caused me? How many nightmares I've had about you showing up and ruining my photos? Just looking at your face makes me want to." She made a retching sound, physically recoiling from me. God, I wish I'd never called you that night. There it was. The final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I placed my gift on the table near the cake and turned to leave. But Andrea wasn't done. "You know what? I never properly thanked you for that night," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "So thank you, brother, for giving me something to be embarrassed about for the rest of my life." Every time someone asks about you, I have to explain why my own brother looks like that. The guests were starting to stare. Mom was crying. Dad looked like he wanted to drag me out. But I just smiled again, checked my watch, and said, "You're welcome, sis. Enjoy your perfect day." I was halfway to the exit when I heard the first screams. My little chemical concoction had done its job perfectly, a combination of harmless but potent compounds that, when mixed, created an odor so foul it could clear a building. The best part? It was time to release gradually, becoming stronger over several minutes. The chaos that followed was beautiful. The putrid smell of rotten eggs and skunk spray filled the air. Guests began gagging. The string quartet stopped playing. Andrea's precious white roses wilted in a noxious cloud. And there, in the middle of it all, stood my sister in her perfect white dress, retching for real this time. I watched from the parking lot as people poured out of the garden terrace, holding their noses. The hotel staff was baffled. They couldn't find the source of the smell, and their ventilation system only spread it further. Andrea came running out last, her mascara streaking down her face, her perfect wedding ruined. She saw me standing by my car and screamed something, but I couldn't hear her over the commotion. I didn't need to. Her face said it all. The same look of disgust she'd given my scars was now being given by everyone to her perfect venue, her perfect flowers, her perfect day. Rachel was trying not to laugh as we drove away. "Was it worth it?" she asked. I touched the scars on my face, remembering the flames, the pain, and Andrea's words, "You're not my brother anymore." "Every single second," I replied, watching the chaos fade in my rearview mirror. "Some things you can't cover up with makeup or hide in the back row. Sometimes, the ugliness needs to be right out there in the open for everyone to see." Let's see how those wedding photos turn out now, sis. 3 days after the wedding disaster, I was grading lab reports in my classroom when the principal called me to her office. My stomach dropped when I saw who was waiting there: Mom, Dad, Andrea, Tyler, and some guy in an expensive suit I'd never seen before. Andrea's eyes were red and puffy, but there was pure hatred in them when she looked at me. Here we go. Turns out, they figured it out pretty quickly. The hotel's investigation found traces of chemicals in the gift box I'd left. Being the only chemistry teacher in the family made me the obvious suspect. But what really gave me away? The security cameras in my school lab had caught me working late those nights before the wedding. The suit guy, apparently the hotel's lawyer, had all the footage ready on his tablet. The numbers they threw at me were staggering. The ruined wedding had cost over $85,000. The venue had to be closed for 3 days for deep cleaning. The flowers, the food, the cake, all wasted. And now they wanted me to pay for everything. Not just the damages to the hotel, but a complete do-over wedding for precious Andrea. "You're going to fix this," Dad growled, throwing a detailed invoice on the desk. "Every single penny. Your sister deserves her perfect day, and you're going to pay for it." Andrea, who hadn't spoken until then, suddenly found her voice. "You know what's funny?" she said, her words sharp as glass. "I was actually starting to feel guilty about not wanting your horrible face in my wedding. But now I realize I was right all along. You're a monster, Marcus. Not because of your scars, but because of who you are inside." Rich coming from someone who disowned her own brother over some photos. Mom tried her usual peacekeeping routine, suggesting I could take out a loan, maybe sell my car. "It's the right thing to do, honey. After what you did." The principal sat there uncomfortably as Tyler detailed their plans for the new wedding. Same venue, same everything, just 2 months later. They'd already booked it all again, confident they could force me to foot the bill. They even had payment plan options worked out. How considerate of them. I let them finish their demands before speaking. When I finally did, my voice was calm. "No." The silence that followed was deafening. "I saved your life," I continued, looking directly at Andrea. "I ran into a burning car and pulled you out while everyone else stood watching. These scars? They're from melting metal and burning gasoline. Your perfect fiancé was there too, remember? He watched from a safe distance while I burned." Dad slammed his hand on the desk. "That doesn't give you the right to dash." "To what?" I cut him off. "To react when my own sister treats me like some kind of freak? When my own parents suggest I hide away so I don't embarrass the family? You want me to pay for a new wedding? Here's what I owe you. Nothing. The hotel lawyer cleared his throat, mentioning something about legal action. I turned to him with a smile that pulled at my scars. Go ahead. Sue me. And when we go to court, I'll tell them everything. About how the bride banned her brother from her wedding because of scars he got saving her life. About how my family decided that wedding photos were more important than basic human decency. I'm sure the local news would love that story. Andrea's face went white. She knew as well as I did how that would play out in public. Her perfect event planning business wouldn't survive that kind of publicity. You wouldn't, she whispered. Try me, I replied. You wanted to pretend you didn't have a brother? Congratulations. You don't. Not anymore. Now get out of my workplace before I call security. They left, one by one. Mom crying, Dad fuming, Tyler supporting a shaking Andrea. The lawyer lingered just long enough to give me his card just in case I reconsidered. Later that evening, Rachel found me sitting in my apartment, staring at old family photos again. But this time, I wasn't sad. I was relieved. Because sometimes the price of revenge isn't measured in dollars and cents. Sometimes it's measured in the bridges you burn and the ties you sever. And some prices are worth paying. 2 months after the wedding disaster, I was leaving school when I saw a familiar figure sitting on the steps. Andrea. She looked different, no designer clothes, no perfect makeup, none of that carefully curated appearance she usually maintained. She was just sitting there, hugging herself in an oversized sweater, looking small and lost. Life has a way of humbling people, doesn't it? I learned from Rachel, who heard through mutual friends, that everything had fallen apart for Andrea in the weeks following the ruined wedding. The story of what happened had spread through our small town like wildfire. Her event planning business took a massive hit, turns out. People aren't keen on hiring a wedding planner whose own wedding ended in disaster. But the real blow came when Tyler left. Apparently, he couldn't handle the embarrassment. The whispers, the stares, the way people looked at them with a mixture of pity and barely concealed amusement. He called off their rescheduled wedding 3 weeks ago, saying he needed space to reevaluate. Last I heard, he'd started dating one of his real estate clients. I considered walking past her to my car. After everything that happened, I had every right to ignore her. But something made me stop. Maybe it was the way she was sitting there, looking so much like the little sister I used to know. The one who would climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The one I didn't hesitate to save from a burning car. What are you doing here, Andrea? She looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. Real ones this time, not the manipulative kind she usually used to get her way. I've been trying to work up the courage to come see you for days, she said softly. I didn't know if you'd even talk to me. I didn't sit down, but I didn't leave either. Just stood there, waiting. Tyler left me, she continued, her voice cracking. But that's not why I'm here. I mean, it is, but not because I need something from you. It's because when he left, do you know what he said? He said he couldn't be with someone who would treat their own brother, someone who literally walked through fire for them, like garbage over some wedding photos. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. And the worst part is, he was right. I've been horrible. Worse than horrible. I've been a monster, and not the kind you see in movies. The real kind. The kind that looks their savior in the face and calls them ugly. Was I actually hearing this? You know what I remember most about that night? She continued. Not the crash. Not the flames. I remember your voice. You kept talking to me, telling me it would be okay, even as I watched your skin burning. You never screamed. Not once. You just kept making sure I was okay. She stood up, but kept her distance, like she wasn't sure she had the right to come closer. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not here to fix things either. Some things can't be fixed. I needed you to know that I understand now. About the scars. About sacrifice. About what real ugliness looks like. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. But maybe understanding. It took losing everything for you to see it? She nodded, fresh tears falling. I lost my fiancé, my business is failing, most of my friends won't talk to me anymore. But you know what hurts the most? Knowing that I lost my brother long before any of that. Not because of what you did to my wedding, but because of what I did to you. Rachel was waiting in my car, watching us carefully through the windshield. I could see the question in her eyes. What are you going to do? I can't go back to being your brother, I said finally. Too much has happened. Andrea nodded, already turning to leave. But I wasn't finished. But maybe we can start over. As different people. Because the sister I had? She died in that car crash. And the brother you had? He burned away pulling her out. We're different people now. She looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time since the accident. Not at the scars, but at me. I'd like that, she whispered. Even if I don't deserve it. You're right. You don't, I said honestly. But sometimes life gives us second chances. Not because we deserve them, but because we need them. As I walked to my car, I heard her call out one last time. Marcus? Thank you. Not for today. For that night. For everything. I didn't turn around, but I nodded. Because sometimes, that's enough. Sometimes, the deepest scars aren't the ones you can see. And sometimes, healing doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means finding a new way forward, even if the path is as twisted and marked as the scars on my face. After all, some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Sometimes, you just need to build a different bridge entirely.